Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into an absolutely wild and honestly pretty complex controversy. I was totally blown away by the sequence of events uncovered in the recent analysis we're looking at today. We are tracking a situation that literally sent shockwaves through India's educational community. All right, let's jump right into this. Our starting point is the night of June 2nd, over in Patna, Bihar. For context, this city is a massive hub for students who are grinding for government jobs. That night, a shocking, violent attack went down at one of the country's absolute biggest coaching centers. But as the source material reveals, that physical attack, it was really just the opening scene of a much larger and way darker narrative.
Now, you might be wondering, and this is really the central mystery of the source's analysis. How exactly does a victim, someone whose property was completely trashed and whose staff was brutalized, suddenly become the prime accused in a massive criminal case in just 9 days? It's a rapid, almost unbelievable flip in the narrative. The source carefully traces this transformation, peeling back all the layers of police reports, media broadcasts, and timeline discrepancies to figure out what actually went down.
To really get the fallout, we gotta look at the inciting incident. According to the source material, on June 2nd, a mob of about 15 to 20 attackers just descended upon the coaching center. We're talking hurling stones, totally vandalizing the office, and tearing down hoardings. The violence actually escalated to the point where a security guard was beaten so severely he had to be hospitalized. And then, the sound of gunshots echoed through the dark. And remember, this wasn't just some random, run-of-the-mill coaching center. This belonged to a massive figure in the education space.
Section: The man behind the name. So to truly grasp the scale of this whole thing, we really need to understand who exactly was targeted here. The source dedicates significant time to profiling the educator at the center of the storm, Khan Sir. And he isn't just a teacher. The guy is an absolute phenomenon. Just looking at the numbers, the sheer scale of his influence is staggering. As the source data highlights, Khan Sir commands a massive audience of 26 million YouTube subscribers. That's 2.6 crore. He basically built this empire from a single tiny room back in 2019 by breaking down super complex topics in a way that just clicked with people. But beyond the education side, the source really emphasizes his commitment to affordability, pointing out his incredibly unique operational model. Get this, he opened a hospital in Patna where a blood test costs a mere 7 rupees and an ECG is just 25 rupees. He was widely celebrated for this exact kind of work. Section: The sudden media flip. Okay, so with that background, the immediate aftermath of the June 2nd attack gets super perplexing. The source points out that the most jarring reaction actually didn't just come from local authorities, but from the mainstream media. Almost overnight, the narrative surrounding this educator completely inverted. The source draws a really sharp contrast in the media's coverage here. Before the attack, news channels routinely invited him to high-profile events, labeling him India's favorite teacher and praising him for making a deep impact. But then suddenly, the coverage just flipped. The exact same channels began broadcasting operations to literally hunt him down, labeling him a fugitive and a mafia, and obsessively calling him Faisal Khan. Now, to be clear, our explainer remains entirely neutral on these specific claims, but we are objectively tracing how the source highlights this incredibly dramatic pivot. The source compiles this huge barrage of rapid-fire allegations that were broadcasted across networks in the days right after the attack. News anchors were claiming he was operating as a mafia boss with billions in illegal assets. Random individuals were brought on air to accuse him of land grabbing. They debated his real name, claiming he used Amit Singh just to hide his identity, and even accused him of faking Hindu cultural practices, like wearing Rakis, just to gain popularity. The source strongly implies that a deliberate Hindu-Muslim communal angle was being heavily pushed to discredit him. Meanwhile, the legal situation was also accelerating fast. Let's look at the police narrative impartially, exactly as reported by the source. Initially, cops stated there was zero evidence of any firing. But then, a day later, a clip surfaced showing Khan Sir's security guards firing up into the air. The police arrested the guards and alleged that during interrogation, those guards claimed Khan Sir himself had ordered them to fire, allegedly telling them he would handle whatever happens. But on the flip side, we have the educator's defense as outlined in the investigative report. The defense argues that the guards only fired their licensed weapons in the air as an absolute last resort of self-defense. The source details claims that the attackers had brutally beaten a guard half to death, the police were taking way too long to arrive, and, get this, the attackers had explicitly threatened to blow up Khan Sir with a bomb within 3 to 4 days. And then, just 3 days later, things reached a total legal boiling point. On June 5th, the source notes that Khan Sir's name was officially added to the First Information Report, or FIR. So suddenly, the man whose center was attacked in the first place was now facing severe charges, including attempt to murder and violations under the Arms Act. And within that exact same week, the fire department randomly audited his building and handed him a notice too.
Section: The real catalyst, NEAT. So the absolute crucial point we have to ask is, why did this happen so fast? Well, to answer this, the source uses a sort of peeling the onion technique to pivot the narrative. The analysis argues that the June 2nd attack and the massive media trial that followed were not isolated incidents at all, but rather the explosive fallout from a completely different event altogether.
The real catalyst, according to the source analysis, traces all the way back to May 3rd, which was the date of the NEAT medical entrance exam. Widespread paper leaks totally corrupted the exam, devastating the futures of over 22 lakh, that's 2.2 million students nationwide. This understandably caused massive national outrage. Educators across the entire country, led very prominently by Khan Sir, began fiercely demanding accountability. They were calling for the resignation of the education minister and directly calling out the testing agency.
The source actually includes this incredibly powerful quote from Khan Sir to illustrate the severe emotional and financial stakes for the students he was defending. He was vocalizing the silent suffering of the lower middle class, stating, "Mothers have mortgaged their Mangal Sutras, and fathers have taken loans to send their children to study. These students were traveling in overcrowded trains like animals, only to find the entire system was rigged against them." And this fierce advocacy ultimately led to a highly televised confrontation. The source details a very heated TV debate that took place on May 29th regarding the NEAT leaks. Instead of questioning the government, the prominent news anchor allegedly insulted the educators right to their faces, calling them two-penny YouTube stars who just collect views. Well, in response, Khan Sir delivered a blistering counterattack live on air, accusing the anchor and the media of being brokers, sycophants, and running fake news shops that protect the establishment instead of the actual students.
Section: A chronology of events. Now we get to the real core of the argument. The source relies heavily on the incredibly tight timing of these events to build its case. By putting all these dates side by side, the analysis constructs a chronology that it claims reveals a highly coordinated campaign of retaliation.
If we walk through this timeline, it brilliantly illustrates their thesis. Just look at this. On May 29th, the educator calls a major media anchor a broker on national television. Just 4 days later, on June 2nd, his coaching center is violently attacked. By June 5th, he's hit with an FIR for attempted murder and a sudden fire safety notice. And then, on June 7th, that exact same TV anchor files a massive 2 crore rupee defamation lawsuit against him in the Delhi High Court. The source basically asks its audience to look at this timeline and consider a vital question. Is this entire sequence of physical attacks, sudden police action, coordinated media defamation, and massive lawsuits just a mere coincidence? Or is it, exactly as the explainer argues, a deliberate and coordinated suppression campaign designed specifically to punish him for criticizing the establishment on national television?
Section: The broader impact. The source material emphasizes that this story isn't just about one famous educator in Patna. By zooming out, the analysis claims that this incident is actually indicative of a much broader, systemic crackdown happening across the entire country.
The source provides some specific collateral damage to really prove this point. Over in Allahabad, when students took to the streets to protest the NEAT paper leaks and systemic corruption, educators stood right alongside them. Well, the very next day, the state government abruptly sealed 3 major coaching centers belonging to those specific teachers. The message, according to the source, was pretty clear: support the students, lose your livelihood.
The source even points to protests in the capital at Jantar Mantar to show the tactics allegedly being used to discredit the youth. The analysis highlights this crazy anecdote where a man gave an interview at a student protest, randomly shouting extreme anti-national slogans. It was later revealed, and allegedly admitted by a political troll on social media, that this man was an agent provocateur, sent specifically to infiltrate the protest, say extreme things on camera, and thereby defame the entire student movement as anti-national. So, bringing it all together, the original analysis presents these final conclusions. It argues that there is a concerted effort out there to silence vocal educators through a mix of legal harassment and sheer physical intimidation. Furthermore, it claims that media networks are deploying communal Hindu-Muslim narratives specifically to distract the public from massive governmental failures, like the national exam leaks we talked about. Ultimately, the source concludes this is all part of a systemic attempt to suppress the youth's fundamental ability to educate, agitate, and organize. And that really leaves us with one incredibly profound thought to consider based on this explainer. If the very people who educate the youth, the teachers who have the platform and the courage to demand accountability, are intimidated into silence through lawsuits, FIRs, and media trials, who is left to speak for the future of the students? It's a complex controversy for sure, but understanding these events is absolutely crucial to seeing the bigger picture of how information and dissent are handled today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.